welcome to TeaFairy Storytime. And we are here at Greenbelt Access Television, also known as GATE. And I want to thank Phoebe McFarb for having me on. This is my newest toy. It is a bubble wand. Isn't it wonderful? It looks like bubbles, but what's really cool is it's made out of little pieces of plastic. But when you spin it, it starts to look like a bubble. I thought that was kind of cool. I had to have it. All right, so I've got my friend Frank here. He's a Bigfoot. You can tell because he's got big feet. And he came all the way from California with me. And now I live here in Greenbelt. And I am known as a literary fairy. And so I read books. I read literature. And I've got a variety of different online places that you can find me. But this is my newest adventure here at Greenbelt Access Television. Today we are going to be reading two books. Well, not total two books. We're going to read this first one, which is called The Wish Carvers, and it is by Kathleen Gauer and illustrated by Sari, Richter. We'll read this one. It's a picture book. The whole thing, we're going to read it. The second book that we're going to read, the first chapter only, is called Sandy the Service Dog Lost in a Hurricane. And it's written by Michelle M. Deyarmin and illustrated by Jess Burhan. And the reason why we're only reading the first chapter is because there's not very many illustrations in it. And I already read it on my podcast, which is TeaFairy Storytime podcast. Most podcasting sources carry it. And it has a second book to it, but we're not even going to read any of that one. I just wanted to show it to you that there's two books in this series. All right. You guys ready? I am. The Wish Carvers, written by Kathleen Gauer and illustrated by Sari, Richter. And it says on the knife, "What's carved with me will come to be." Reading books is magical by Kathleen Gauer. I agree, Kathleen. To my amazing family and all who believe in magic and fairy tales, Kathleen. For baby, thank you for taking naps so I could paint. I hope you had enchanting dreams. Sorry. Day after day, week after week, month after month, Faye and her brother Eddie carved and painted. They sold their carvings at the village market every Saturday. The two earned enough to buy food to eat, clothes to wear, and more paint for their carvings. But sometimes all that work was exhausting. Every day they complained about the same things. "My hands are so sore from all this carving," Faye grumbled. "I wish I could take a long rest." "All my clothes are covered in paint," Eddie whined. "I wish I had something nice to wear." And you'll look there, you'll see at market, there's an ogre and a wizard and a mouse and a cat. And these guys are elves, I believe, because they have little pointed ears. They're little worker elves. And they make all kinds of really cool things. One Saturday afternoon, while strolling home from the market, Faye and Eddie discovered an old carving knife by the roadside. When they brought it back to the cabin, they spotted some words carved on the handle. Faye read them out loud. "What's carved with me will come to be." Can you guys say that? Because we're going to have to read it a whole lot. "What's carved with me will come to be." "Do you suppose that's true?" Eddie said. "Let's find out," Faye said, and she carved a miniature wooden pot of gold. Eddie painted it, and they waited. Nothing happened. Then Eddie read the words on the knife out loud. "What's carved with me will come to be." And ever so slowly, the wooden pot of gold turned into a real, full-size pot of gold. "It worked," Faye shouted. "We can carve anything we wish for." "Woo-hoo!" Eddie exclaimed. "Let's try something bigger." Faye scratched her head. I know. I'll carve us living in a large stone cottage. Then you can paint it. As Faye carved away and Eddie painted, they chanted, "What's carved with me will come to be." I like Faye's face. Do you see how she's sticking her little tongue out? She's working really hard. By sundown, they had crafted their cottage. It was so perfect, Faye was positive she saw a light flicker in its little window. She quickly set the carving by the bedroom door and hopped into bed. The next morning, I love all the details in the illustrations. Faye's got bunny slippers. Faye and Eddie awoke to find themselves inside a huge stone cottage. "Yippee!" Eddie squealed. "The magic worked!" And there above the fireplace, you can see the picture of the magic knife, the magic carving knife. But when Faye and Eddie crawled out of bed, they discovered their pot of gold had disappeared, and there was more work to do than ever. There was more house to be cleaned, more garden to tend, and more firewood to be chopped. Soon, Faye's hands were sorer than ever, and Eddie's clothes were dirtier than ever. That's a lot of work. I'd be tired too. "This place is much too big," Eddie moaned. "How can we ever keep up with all this work?" Faye said. "I know. I'll carve us living as king and queen in a lovely fairy tale castle with castle helpers that do all this extra work for us." "Good idea," Eddie said. "At least we won't have to work so hard." Again, Faye carved away and Eddie painted, and together they chanted, "What's carved with me will come to be." By day's end, they had created their castle. It was so realistic that Faye was convinced she saw one of its towers sparkle. She stood the carving up against their bedroom door and climbed into bed. And just before sunrise, clatter, clatter, swish, swish, chop, chop, Faye and Eddie awoke to find themselves inside a giant fairy tale castle with many castle helpers cleaning, gardening, and chopping firewood. "Sounds like our castle helpers are already busy," Faye said. "I guess we'd better get to work too," Eddie sighed. And you can see they've got a half woman, half horse person, some smiling trees, a cat and a dog, a butterfly with a broom, and there's a butterfly in the crack there with a paintbrush. There's a dragon, he's carrying packages, and this guy's doing some gardening. There's an old man in the garden. I don't know what he is necessarily. He's got a great costume though. Faye and Eddie were barely out of bed and dressed when tourists started lining up to tour their beautiful castle. You see all the tourists? One is a cyclops, and then there's a fairy and a bunny person and a goat person, and there's an elf, all kinds of interesting characters. "How will we ever cope with all these people?" Eddie asked. "We're used to such a peaceful life. And now we'll have no time to carve and paint," Faye grumbled. Fetty. Oh, even fairies make mistakes reading. And then, chatter, chatter, squish, squish, slop, slop. Tourists began to pour in by the hundreds. Muddy footprints covered the floors. Pictures were knocked off the walls. And when the tourists left, they left all their trash behind. Ew, look. Apple cores and feathers and roses. I like this guy's foot. He's got furry feet, kind of like Bigfoot. "This castle is a royal mess," Faye groaned. "However, now even our castle helpers are exhausted and grumbling about all the hard work. I wish we still lived in our tiny log cabin," Eddie whined. Faye said. "I have an idea." One more time, Faye carved away. Eddie painted, and together they chanted, "What's carved with me will come to be." And that evening, Faye placed the freshly painted log cabin by their bedroom door. She tossed the magic knife out the window and slid into bed. Early the next morning, what do you think is going to happen early the next morning? You want to guess? Faye and Eddie awoke to find themselves back inside their tiny log cabin. Fortunately, they still had the money from selling their carvings at the village market. It was enough to buy food to eat, clothes to wear, and more paint for their carvings. Look how happy they are. It's always nice to be back home. I can't wait to get back to work, Faye said, and she reached for her trusty old carving knife. Not the new one, her old trusty one. Eddie pulled on his comfy old painting clothes. I can't wait to get started. And then he scurried off to fetch his brushes and his paints. And that is the end. And I'm not really sure what's up with the frog people, but aren't they cute? And this is a picture of our author, Kathleen Gauer, and our beautiful illustrator, Sari. And I just want to thank them for sending this book to us. You can go to Skipping Stone Press. They can be followed on Facebook at Skipping Stone Press, Instagram at Skipping Stone Press, and you can visit www.skippingstonepress.net. Hi, kitties! Gregoire the Great here. Let's see what TeaFairy's friends are up to today.
Hi, kids! Rex here with a Rex Moment, and I'm here with my friend, author Kathleen Gauer. Thank you for joining us, Kathleen.
Oh, well, it's wonderful to be here, and thank you for inviting me. I hope you like my magic wings. I found them, and TeaFairy asked me to wear something special, so I put these purple fairy wings on.
You look magical.
Oh, thank you. I hope they're magical.
TeaFairy asked me to thank you for sending in your book, The Wish Carver. What a magical book. Can you tell us what inspired this story?
You never know when you're going to come up with an idea for a story, and you can find ideas everywhere. And the way I came up with the idea for the Wish Carvers was my mom used to read fairy tales to my sister and me at bedtime, like Goldilocks and the Three Bears and Cinderella and lots of other classic fairy tales. So I decided to write a fairy tale with magic and make-believe characters. Only mine would be a fairy tale that no one had ever heard before. So my story is about two brother and sister elves named Faye and Eddie who find a magic carving knife that will turn everything they carve into something real. But after carving a pot of gold and a huge stone cottage and a fairy tale castle, they ran into lots and lots of problems and began to miss their old peaceful way of life. So the lesson in this story is be grateful for what you have and also be careful what you wish for.
I loved this story. We just listened to it and it was so fun. TeaFairy really enjoyed it too.
Oh, I'm glad.
You have other books that you've written as well. Would you like to share?
Yes, I've published 4 picture books altogether, and 3 of my books are in libraries around the world. And it's so exciting to know that people miles and oceans away in other countries are reading my stories. It's like I'm traveling around the world with my books. So the first one was High in the Sky. And this is a story about a young child who hops onto a tire swing and uses imagination to go on some really exciting adventures, like blasting off to the moon and surfing a huge whale. Surfing a huge wave. This must be working some crazy magic on my voice. Anyway, I will show you my next book. My next book was called For No Reason. And you've probably heard people saying that all the time. And I got the idea to write this book because I was reading a book in my backyard. And what happened was a boy in the backyard was talking to his mother. Actually, he was whining and he was saying, "Christian pushed me into the pool for no reason." And I thought, that sounds like a great idea for a book about bullying. So that's what I did. And so this story is about Jamie Higgins, and she finds a clever way to deal with a classroom bully without getting into trouble and without being mean.
That sounds like a good lesson.
Yeah. And my latest book is called Bath Time Fun. And it's just published. And how this book got started was it's from a poem that I wrote over 35 years ago for my own kids when they used to love to splash in the tub.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's a bubbly, fun tugboat adventure where kids get to travel off in a tugboat to a place where anything is possible. And there's even trees that grow candy, and you can swing in the trees with monkeys and bats. Doesn't that sound interesting?
That sounds so fun.
Yes. And here is a picture from my newest book, if you're interested in seeing.
Yes, please.
My favorite one is this one. So I'm going to show it to you.
Okay.
You see some of the things?
Wow.
They get to ride on, hold on to a whale's tail and ride the ocean blue, and they get to swim with rainbow fish and even eels.
Wow, that's really beautiful. You should, if you're interested, I'm sure TeaFairy would be happy to share this book sometime.
Well, that's a very good idea. I will keep that in mind.
Thank you, Kathleen. I was told that you also sent us a short video of you doing something that you love doing. Can you tell us what we are about to watch and how it makes you feel?
Well, the video shows me practicing my golf swing at a driving range.
Ping! I love that sound. And it's these little successes that keep me coming back for more. Just like in writing, only instead of looking for a great hook, I'm trying to lose my hook. One thing for sure, both skills take lots of practice, and there's no such thing as perfect in either craft. Most important thing is to have fun and enjoy the challenge.
Thank you so much for having me and inviting me to your kingdom, your fairy kingdom. And I hope that all your listeners never give up on their dreams too, and that they read lots and lots of books.
I encourage lots of reading. I love reading. It's my favorite thing to do, but it takes a lot of practice.
Yes, it does.
Thank you so much, Kathleen, for joining me today and sharing your stories and your passions with us. We hope you'll come back again and share another book sometime.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed myself, and it was nice to meet you, Rex.
It was nice meeting you, Kathleen. Bye.
Bye.
Wow, that was great. Let's check in with TeaFairy and see what story she's reading next. Sandy the Service Dog, Lost in a Hurricane, and it's written by Michelle M. Deyarmin and illustrated by Jess Burhan. And it says, "Thank you for your endless support. Love, Michelle." For my niece, Alex, who helped me to realize that this was possible, and to everyone who ever believed in me, thank you and enjoy. Chapter 1. There's only little illustrations, so kind of why I'm not going to read the whole book. The storm is approaching us faster than we can think. Hurricane Jude will be here before we know it. Please make sure you're taking the proper precautions. The TV weather lady sounded worried. Please do not take this storm lightly. It's going to be one of the biggest we've experienced yet. I lay curled up safely at the foot of Shelby's feet. It's going to be okay, Sandy, Shelby said to me. My nerves were getting in, and I was starting to shake. Shelby calmed me down, though. She always does. I know she looked after me. She gave me a gentle pat on the head and a tight, comforting hug. Ugh, I love her hugs. Shelby is my best friend and my number one priority. She's 10 years old and suffers from a disease called epilepsy. Epilepsy causes Shelby to have frequent seizures. When Shelby has a seizure, she falls unconscious and starts shaking uncontrollably. Seizures are very scary. Luckily, I've been trained to assist her during and after her seizures. I know when she's about to have one, and I get her mom to give her the medication that helps with them. I'm proud of how well I look after Shelby when she needs me. She deserves it. She's basically the most awesome person ever. Shelby and I live together in a beautiful home in the southernmost part of Florida, along with Shelby's mom, Kelly, and her 4-year-old brother, Luke. Shelby's dad left the family when Luke was only a couple of months old, so Shelby's mom has raised both of her kids on her own. Luke doesn't like me that much, probably because I spend most of my time with Shelby. Shelby and I do everything together. I have to be by her side in case she has a seizure. Going to school is by far my favorite thing to do. Watching her with all her friends is amazing, and recess and lunch are to die for. All of the teachers at school know me by name and sometimes give me treats, which is a definite plus. When the weather is nice, Shelby and I walk to our school from her house. We haven't been able to walk lately, though. We've been drenched with bucket loads of rain over the past few days because of the nearing storm. I've been hearing more and more talk about this hurricane, and it's really starting to freak me out. I've heard about hurricanes before, but never experienced one. This week at school, we learned a lot about them. They bring high winds and heavy rains. They can even destroy houses, bringing down trees and cause flash flooding. We read stories about them, about past hurricanes and all of the people who lost their houses. I was sad and afraid that Hurricane Jude would cause damage to our house. At least Kelly was preparing us for the absolute worst. As soon as she heard that there was the slightest possibility of a hurricane, she started packing bags full of clothes and food for Shelby and Luke. She made all the necessary phone calls and spoke with all of our neighbors, including the Johnsons next door. She had a plan. When the hurricane hit our area, we were going to climb into the Johnsons' boat and float safely to a nearby shelter where we would stay until the storm was over. I went over the plan in my head as the winds picked up, and before I knew it, I was whimpering in fear. Shelby was already fast asleep. She looked peaceful, her arms curled around Candy, her pink and white teddy bear. See, even fairies make mistakes when they read. I rested my head on her pillow as I listened to the rain violently pelting our roof. I just wanted the storm to end. I wanted sunny days and warm walks to school again. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, Shelby was screaming my name and shaking me, "Sandy, please wake up. We have to go." I opened my eyes and found Shelby standing out in front of me with her bag in her hand and her yellow raincoat on. This was it. The storm was hitting. I leapt from the bed and into her arms, shaking like a leaf. The wind whirled, and thunder crashed, and lots of water flooded into our house. Oh no! I didn't know what to do, but I tried to be strong for Shelby. Kelly led the way, carrying Luke in one arm and the bags she'd packed in the other. Shelby followed closely behind and carried me with her. The water was rising. "Mommy, I'm scared," I heard Luke say as he tried to get into the Johnsons' boat. "It's going to be okay," Kelly replied gently. She loaded him into the boat and zipped his blue life jacket tightly. Shelby put me down in the boat. I shivered. My paws and legs were soaked. "Sorry for getting you wet, Sandy," Shelby said. I lay down by her feet. I didn't care about my wet paws. I was just glad that we were all together and safe. We were all scared, bunched up together and bobbing along in the boat. Then the sky gave a loud crash as thunder rolled overhead. A huge wave hit the boat. Boom! Crash! The boat rocked violently. Luke was at the edge of the boat. The giant wave took him by surprise. He toppled out and very quickly began to be carried away by the rushing water that was underneath us. "No!" Shelby screamed, and Kelly rushed to the edge of the boat, trying to reach Luke and pull him back to safety. I jumped up from my spot at Shelby's feet and looked over the edge of the boat. Luke was trying his hardest to swim. His life jacket could barely keep him afloat. I knew what I had to do. Splash! Into the freezing cold water I went, and then under the water, trying to work out which way was up so that I could breathe again. Luke struggled against the waves. I swam like I didn't know I could, and finally I reached him. Grabbing Luke by his life jacket, I pulled and tugged him back towards the boat, trying my best to keep his head above the water. We went under a couple of times, and at one point I didn't think we were going to be coming back up. The water was so cold that when we finally reached the safety of the boat, my paws had gone blue and tingly. Kelly and Shelby grabbed Luke from me when we were close enough, lifting him safely back into the boat and draping a towel around his shaking shoulders. He was screaming and crying. Noticing that I was still in the water, Mrs. Johnson raced to Luke's aid, and Kelly leaned over the edge of the boat to grab my paw. I tried to climb up, but it was too slippery. Thunder clapped again, and another wave crashed into me. Kelly lost her grip on my paw, and I sunk down into the water. I gasped for air, trying my hardest not to let the water keep me down. The boat bobbed up and down and began to drift away. "Sandy!" Shelby cried. I started to float down the river. I tried so hard to swim back toward the boat to get back to Shelby, but the water was rushing faster than I could paddle. Waves crashed over my head, and the boat grew smaller and smaller. I was stranded. The wind was too strong, forcing me back underwater each time I managed to right myself. I sunk once more, and when I came up, the boat disappeared into the distance. I started to cry. At the corner of my eye, I saw something floating close to me. I went towards it. It was only a milk crate, but it would have to do. I climbed in and started floating down the river, sad and alone. Now, I hate to leave you guys there, but that is a cliffhanger, because Shelby does actually make it out of the river, and she meets some interesting characters. There's a raccoon and a friend of hers that ends up helping her. His name is Max. And let's see, there's more illustrations. A skunk. We all like skunks, right? They smell wonderful. No? Okay, sorry. A crocodile. She makes lots of friends. Some of them are kind of scary. And eventually, she does find her way back to her family. But you have to read the whole story to find out how. And then there's the second book called Sandy the Service Dog, Honeymoon Disaster. And you'll notice that Shelby has her friend Max with her. So you have to read the first one to find out why the second one has Max in it. They're both really good. I enjoyed reading them. Again, you can find them on my podcast, and I'll make sure that we put some details in the, the segment at the end, the credits that have where you can find the podcast. And if you like story times, you can find me on YouTube at TeaFairy Storytime. You can find me on Facebook at TeaFairy and Friends Storytimes and Adventures, and on the podcast, TeaFairy Storytime podcast. And that's it, folks. I hope that you enjoyed the story time, and tune in again. Have a good day. Bye.